Chapter 2. What Lucy Found There. "Good evening," said Lucy, but the fawn was so busy picking up its parcels that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening," said the fawn. "Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve?" "My name's Lucy," she said, not quite understanding him. "But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl?" asked the fawn. "Of course I'm a girl," said Lucy. "You are, in fact, human?" "Of course I'm human," said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said the fawn. "How stupid of me, but I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted, that is, to say," and then it stopped as if it had been going to say something it had not intended, but had remembered in time. Delighted, it went on. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus." "I am very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus," said Lucy. "And may I ask, O daughter of Eve," said Mr. Tumnus, "how have you come into Narnia?" "Narnia? What's that?" said Lucy. "This is the land of Narnia," said the fawn. "Where we are now, all that lies between the lamppost and the great castle at Cair Paravel on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west?" I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room," said Lucy. "Ah," said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice. "If only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I should no doubt know all about those strange countries, but it's too late now." "But there aren't any countries at all," said Lucy, almost laughing. "It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It is summer there." "Meanwhile," said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia, and has been so for a very long time, and we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of Speum, where eternal summer reigns round the bright city of Wardobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me?" "Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus," said Lucy, "but I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back." "It's only just round the corner," said the fawn, "and there'll be a roaring fire, and toast, and sardines, and cake." "Well, that's very kind of you," said Lucy, "but I shan't be able to stay long." "If you take my arm, daughter of Eve," said Mr. Tumnus, "I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. Now, off we go." And so Lucy found herself walking through the wood arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. They had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough, and there were rocks all about and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside as if he were going to walk straight into an unusually large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found herself blinking in the light of a wood fire. Then Mr. Tumnus stooped and took a flaming piece of wood out of the fire with a neat little pair of tongs and little lamp. "Now we shan't be long," he said, and immediately put a kettle on. Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little dry, clean cave of reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs, "one for me and one for a friend," said Mr. Tumnus, "and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire, and above that a picture of an old fawn with a gray beard. In one corner there was a door, which Lucy thought must lead to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, and on one wall there was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at these while he was setting out the tea things. They had titles like The Life and Letters of Celius or Nymphs and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, A Study in Popular Legends, or Is Man a Myth? "Now, daughter of Eve," said the fawn. And really, it was a wonderful tea. There was a nice brown egg lightly boiled for each of them, and then sardines on toast, and then butter toast, and then toast with honey, and then a sugar-topped cake. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the fawn began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of the life in the forest. He told about the midnight dances and how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees came out to dance with the fawns, about long hunting parties after the white milk stag, who could give you wishes if you caught him, about feasting and treasure-seeking with the wild red dwarfs in deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floor, and then about summer, when the woods were green and old Cineas on his fat donkey would come to visit them, and sometimes Bacchus himself, and then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up to jollification for weeks on end. Not that that isn't always winter now, he added gloomily. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from his case on the dresser a strange little flute that looked as if it were made of straws and began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so very sorry to stop you. I mean, I do love that tune, but really, I must go. Go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes." "It's no good now, you know," said the fawn, laying down its flute and shaking its head at her very sorrowfully. "No good?" said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean? I've got to go home at once. The others will be wondering what happened to me." But a moment later she asked, "Mr. Tumnus, whatever is the matter?" For the fawn's brown eyes had filled with tears, and then the tears began to trickle down its cheeks, and soon they were running off the end of its nose, and at last it covered its face with its hands and began to howl. "Mr. Tumnus," said Lucy in great distress. Don't! What is the matter? Aren't you well? Dear Mr. Tumnus, do tell me what is wrong." But the fawn continued sobbing as if its heart would break. And even when Lucy went over and put her arms around him and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop. He merely took the handkerchief and kept on using it, wringing it out with both hands whenever it got too wet to be of any more use, so that presently Lucy was standing in a damp patch. "Mr. Tumnus," bawled Lucy in his ear, shaking him. "Do stop! Stop it at once! You ought to be ashamed of yourself. A great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about?" Oh, sobbed Mr. Tumnus. "I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn." "I don't think you're a bad fawn at all," said Lucy. "I think you're a very good fawn. You're the nicest fawn I've ever met." Oh, you wouldn't say that if you knew," replied Mr. Tumnus between his sobs. "No, I'm a bad fawn. I don't suppose there ever was a worse fawn since the beginning of the world." "But what have you done?" asked Lucy. "My old father now," said Mr. Tumnus. "That's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this." "A thing like what?" said Lucy. "Like what I've done," said the fawn. "Taken service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch." "The White Witch? Who is she?" "Why, it is she that has got all Narnia under her thumb. It's she that makes it always winter and never Christmas. Think of that." "How awful," said Lucy. "But what does she pay you for?" "That's the worst of it," said Mr. Tumnus with a deep groan. "I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Would you believe that I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor, innocent child in the woods, one that had never done me any harm, and pretend to be friendly with it, and invite it to my home, to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it to sleep, and then handing it over to the White Witch?" "No," said Lucy. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the sort. But I have, said the fawn. Well, said Lucy rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and yet not too hard on him. Well, that was pretty bad, but you're so sorry for it that I'm sure you will never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It isn't something that I have done. I'm doing it now, this very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning very white. You're the child, said Mr. Tumnus. I had orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the wood, I was to catch them and hand them over to her, and you were the first one I ever met. And I pretended to be your friend and ask you to tea, and all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, he said, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off and my horns sawn off and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her hand over my beautiful cloven hooves and turn them into horrid solid hooves like a wretched horse's. And if she is extra and specially angry, she'll turn me into stone, and I shall only be a statue of a fawn in her horrible house, until the 4 thrones at Cair Paravel are filled, and goodness knows when that will happen, or whether it will ever happen at all. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but please let me go home. Of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I've got to. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the witch. Not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamppost. I suppose you can figure your own way back from there, back to Spare and Wardobe. I'm sure I can, said Lucy. We must go as quickly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up and left the tea things on the table, and Mr. Tumnus once more put up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and they went out into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They stole along as quickly as they could, almost without speaking a word. And Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamp post again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Said Tumnus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see in the distance a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said. I can see the wardrobe door. Then be off home as quick as you can, said the fawn. Can you ever forgive me for what I've done, for what I am meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve, said he. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief. Rather, said Lucy, and then ran towards the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs would carry her. And presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats, and instead of crunching snow under her feet, she felt wooden boards, and all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath. It was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the passage. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I made you drop your parcel.
No, it's all right. No, don't bother. No, it's my fault entirely. I was just startled to see... Now, I don't mean to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve?
My name's Lucy, if that's what you mean.
Oh, but you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl?
Of course I'm a girl.
You are, in fact, human.
Of course I'm human. Are you human?
Oh, no, please. I am a fawn.
Oh.
I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I'm delighted. That is to say, I'm delighted. Delighted. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus.
Very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus.
And may I ask, oh, Lucy, daughter of Eve, how you have come into Narnia?
Narnia? What's that?
Well, this is the land of Narnia, where we are now. All that lies between the lamppost and the great castle of Cair Paravel on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west?
I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room.
Oh, if only I'd worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I should doubtless know all about those strange countries.
But they aren't countries at all. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It's summer there.
Oh, meanwhile, it's winter in Narnia, and it has been for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of Spare where eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me?
Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus. But I really should be getting back.
Oh, but it's only just around the corner, and there will be a roaring fire, and toast, and sardines, and cake.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I shan't be able to stay long.
Oh, well, if you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. And now, off we go.
Lucy and the fawn had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough and there were rocks all about and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside, as if he were going to walk into an unusually large rock, but at the last moment Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found herself blinking in the light of a wood fire.
Now we shan't be long. I'll put the kettle on.
Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little, dry, clean cave of reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire, and above that a picture of an old fawn with a grey beard. In one corner there was a door, which Lucy thought must lead to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, and on one wall was a shelf full of books.
Now, daughter of Eve, here is your tea. A lightly boiled egg, sardines on toast, buttered toast with honey, and then a sugar-topped cake.
Oh, thank you. I had no idea anyone lived in a forest like this.
Oh, is it dreary to you?
Dreary? Not at all.
Oh, it's dreary to me. It's been such a long time.
A long time since what?
Oh, since the days when we had midnight dances with the nymphs in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees, or the long hunting parties after the milk-white stag who could give you wishes if you caught him, or the wild red dwarfs in the deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floor who we would feast with and then go treasure-seeking.
It sounds delightful.
The days of summer when the woods were green and old Silenus on his fat donkey would come to visit us, and sometimes Bacchus himself. And then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up for jollification for weeks on end. There was a tune we used to play. Now, what was the tune? Oh, where's my pipe? Here.
and the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later. She shook herself and said,
Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so sorry to stop you, and I do love that tune, but really, I must go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes.
Oh, it's no good now, you know.
No good? What do you mean? I've got to go home at once.
Oh.
The others will be wondering what's happened to me.
It's no good.
Mr. Tumnus, whatever is the matter? Why are you crying?
Oh, me?
Oh, please, Mr. Tumnus, don't cry. What's the matter? Aren't you well? Here, take my handkerchief.
Oh, thank you.
Now do tell me what's wrong. Mr. Tumnus, please.
Oh, me, oh, me, oh, me.
Stop. Stop at once. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. A great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about?
Well, I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn.
I don't think you're a bad fawn at all. I think you're a very good fawn. You're the nicest fawn I've ever met.
Oh, you wouldn't say that if you knew. Oh, no, I'm a bad fawn. I don't suppose there ever was a worse fawn since the beginning of the world.
But what have you done?
Oh, my old father, that's his picture over the fireplace. He never would have done a thing like this.
A thing like what?
Like what I've done. I've taken service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch.
Who's she?
Why, it's she that's got all Narnia under her thumb. It's she that makes it always winter. Always winter and never Christmas. Think of that.
How awful. But what does she pay you for?
Oh, that's the worst of it. I'm a kidnapper for her. That's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Now, would you believe that I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor, innocent child in the wood, one that never done me any harm, and pretend to be friendly with it and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it to sleep and then handing it over to the White Witch?
No, I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the sort.
Oh, but I have.
Well, that was pretty bad. But you're so sorry for it. I'm sure you would never do it again.
Oh, daughter of Eve, don't you understand? It isn't something I have done. I'm doing it now. This very moment.
You mean?
You are the child.
No.
I have orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the wood, I was to catch them and hand them over to her. And you were the first I ever met. And I pretended to be your friend and asked you to tea, and all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go and tell her.
Oh, but you won't. Will you, Mr. Tumnus? Indeed you mustn't.
Well, if I don't, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off, and my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her hand over my beautiful cloven hoofs and turn them into horrid solid hoofs like a wretched horse's. And if she's extra and specially angry, she'll turn me into stone. And I shall be only a statue of a fawn in her horrible house until the 4 thrones at Cair Paravel are filled, and goodness knows when that'll happen, or whether it'll ever happen at all.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, but please let me go home.
Oh, of course I will. Of course, I've got to. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the witch, not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamppost. I suppose you can find your own way from there back to Spare and Wardobe?
I'm sure I can.
Well, we must go as quietly as we can. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. Quickly now.
The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They stole along as quickly as they could without speaking a word, and Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamppost again.
Can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do?
Why, of course I can. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account.
Farewell, daughter of Eve. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief?
Yes, of course. Goodbye.
Lucy ran towards the far-off patch of daylight through the trees in the distance. And presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats. And instead of crunching snow beneath her feet, she felt wooden boards. And all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started.
I'm here! I'm here! I've come back! I'm all right! I can always get back there if... in the middle of a wood? Excuse me,
Goodness gracious me.
are you a fawn?
Yes. Yes, I suppose I am. Thank you. Should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve?
My name is Lucy.
But are you... forgive me. Are you what they call a girl?
Of course I'm a girl.
A human?
Yes, girls are human.
Well, this is delightful. It's delightful. I've never seen a human before. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tumnus, and... How did you get into Narnia?
Narnia? What's that?
Why, it's where we are. This is the land of Narnia. All that lies between the lamppost and the great castle of Cair Paravel on the eastern sea.
The castle of what?
Cair Paravel. I don't think you should worry. There's only one of you. And you. You've come from the wild woods of the west.
No, I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room.
Oh dear. If only I'd worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn at school. You'll think me very ignorant, but I've never heard of the city of Wardobe, nor the land of Spare
It's just back there, I think. It's summer there.
And winter here. It's been winter in Narnia for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Oh, daughter of Eve, from the far land of Spare where eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardobe, how would it be if you came and had tea with me?
I've never taken tea with a fawn before.
Well then.
Really, I suppose I should be getting back.
But it's just round the corner, and there'll be toast, and sardines, and cake. Not long now. Make yourself at home.
perhaps in their ways? Is man a myth?
Ready?
It's such a cosy house, and that really is a wonderful tea.
Do sit. Do sit. One for me and one for a friend.
So, what's it like living in Narnia, Mr. Tumnus?
Life was beautiful here once. Midnight dances in the forest. The nymphs who live in the wells and the dryads who live in the trees would come and dance with us, with the fauns. Oh, and the feasting and the treasure hunting and the summers. The long, long summers when the woods were green and the whole forest given up to jollification for weeks on end.
But why isn't it like that now?
Now it is winter. Endless winter. And always will be unless and until...
Go home. The others will be wondering what's happened to me. Mr. Tumnus, whatever is the matter?
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Don't. Please. What is it? Do tell me. Mr. Tumnus, do stop it at once.
My old father would never have done a thing like this. You see, I'm a very bad fawn.
I don't think you're a bad fawn. I think you're a very good fawn. You're the nicest fawn I've ever met.
You wouldn't say that if you knew. I've done a very bad thing. I've taken service under the White Witch. That's how bad I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch.
The White Witch? Who is she?
Who? Why, it's she who has all Narnia under her thumb. Under her spell. It's she who makes it always winter here. Always winter, never Christmas. Think of that.
How awful. But what does she pay you for?
I'm a kidnapper. Would you believe that I'm the kind of fawn to meet a poor, innocent human child in the wood, pretend to be friendly with it, and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it to sleep and handing it over to the White Witch?
Oh, I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the...
Yes, you were the child. I had orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the wood, I was to catch them and spell them with my flute and make them sleep and hand them over to her.
But you haven't. You've told me.
But if I don't, she's sure to find out. She'll have my tail cut off, and my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out. And if she's extra and specially angry with me, she'll turn me into stone.
I'm sorry. I am sorry. But please let me go home.
Of course I will. I must. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Now that I know you, of course I can't give you up to the witch. But we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamppost. I hope you can find your own way from there back to Spare and, what was it, a wardrobe?
I think I can.
We must go very quietly. The whole wood is full of her spies.